Welcome back to Off Air, the show where we go deeper than the news reports into the battle between power and principle. I'm Ronald Chapman, and today we're unpacking a bombshell. Attorney General Letitia James, that's the same Attorney General that made headlines going after Donald Trump in that massive civil fraud case, is now under investigation herself by the Trump administration and Attorney General Pam Bondi. The Department of Justice has her in their sights for mortgage fraud, as well as her political attacks against Donald Trump. We're going to go into exactly what will happen to her on her way to a potential jail cell. If this plays out, we're not just talking scandal, we're talking serious criminal exposure for Letitia James. Stick with me as we break down the allegations, the evidence, and whether this could end up with Letitia James behind bars. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this is headed. I'm Ron Chapman. Let's get to it. So let's rewind. Letitia James came into office in 2019, pledging to go after Trump. She delivered in February 2024, $454 million penalty against him for what? Not defrauding people at all, apparently making misrepresentations related to the value of property, which was quite subjective in and of itself. Fast forward to today, and suddenly she's facing subpoenas, grand jury subpoenas. On August 8th, 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced an investigation into whether James weaponized her office, targeting Trump in ways that violated his civil rights. If investigators find that her civil case was more of a political hit job than legitimate prosecution, which I'm pretty sure they will, then we're in uncharted territory, turning the hunter into the hunted. But that's not all. Separate from the Trump probe are mortgage fraud allegations that directly implicate James. Reports claim that she misrepresented a Norfolk, Virginia property as her principal residence. I believe a total of 8 times she filled out these applications in order to get better mortgage terms and qualify for programs that she didn't need. Fancy that. She accuses Donald Trump of misrepresenting her property, while simultaneously she's sitting down and filling out an application, making false statements that actually deprive people of money. She misstated details about a Brooklyn property as well. The DOJ says that's not a clerical error, it's fraud. The FBI is digging in, a Virginia grand jury has been convened, and a special prosecutor is on the case. James and her attorney, Abby Lowell, call it politics, but prosecutors call it evidence. And when you've spent years putting other people away for the same conduct, oops, my mistake, I failed to check the right box, simply doesn't fly and won't be a defense. I imagine if I'm the prosecutor in her case, I'm going to play every single video that there was of her standing up and saying Donald Trump is a massive fraudster because he misrepresented his property. So how does this land James in prison? Let's get into the law. First, let's start with the mortgage fraud. If Letitia James, if she lied on the mortgage application to obtain favorable loan terms, that implicates 18 USC 1014, false statements to a financial institution, also potentially wire fraud, and possibly mail fraud, alternative charges. Statutory maximum sentence for those is going to be 20 years. Stacking those together, a potential 30-year penalty for Letitia James. Think that's harsh? That's what she was trying to get Donald Trump for in the civil mortgage fraud case, although that's only a civil penalty. She also moved to try to prosecute, but was ultimately unsuccessful. The DOJ often stacks these charges, but likely her sentence is going to be much smaller. The critical question in this case will be, did she knowingly and willfully misrepresent her residency status or the nature of the property? Mistakes are one thing, patterns are another. Prosecutors love patterns because they show intent. And here we have 8 separate times she filled out these applications and committed fraud. If the Norfolk property was claimed as her principal residence while she clearly lived in New York, that's not just sloppy paperwork, that is a material misrepresentation. The exact kind of bank fraud laws that she's supposed to address as the Attorney General. Now, add in the potential wire fraud. And if those misrepresentations moved through interstate wires, which they most certainly did, it's going to be a potential 20-year sentence. Wire fraud is the Department of Justice's bread and butter. They know how to prosecute it, and I've defended it many times. Now, let's look at the civil rights angle. for her civil case against Donald Trump. Recall, this occurred during an election. It was an effort to malign Donald Trump right before a presidential election and bind him up financially and also lock him into a courtroom. This is where it gets unprecedented. The DOJ is looking at 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against civil rights, and 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. These statutes are usually aimed at rogue cops or officials abusing their authority, but applying them to a state attorney general, it's not happened before. That's pretty new territory, but I think most would agree. We live in a completely new age where these sorts of attacks were allowed against Donald Trump. There were multiple lawsuits and multiple criminal prosecutions that ultimately ended up being baseless. The theory here is that James and her staff conspired to deprive Donald Trump of due process and equal protection by targeting him for political reasons, effectively weaponizing the justice system against him. To prove this, prosecutors will need internal communications, memos, or testimony showing that her prosecution was motivated not by law, but by politics. That's a really high bar. Prosecutorial discretion is broad. It allows prosecutors to do what they need to do to fight crime, and we certainly want that to happen. And courts are reluctant to criminalize political motives. But if smoking gun evidence surfaces, let's say an email saying, let's take him down at all costs, which we know they have, then 241 and 242 become very real threats. Recall here, we have Letitia James, even before she's elected, saying that she's going to do everything she can do to go after Donald Trump. What kind of person, before they've seen evidence, before they've investigated, has the ability to stand up and say, this person is responsible for this action? That is incredibly irresponsible. She never should have been elected as an attorney general. And that is the kind of thing that very well could land her behind bars. The penalty ranges from fines to 10 years in prison per count. And if more serious injury or other aggravating factors results, that sentence could be much higher. So what's the DOJ's playbook here? First, subpoenas. Unlike Letitia James, the DOJ is going to actually investigate this issue. They're going to subpoena records. They're going to take testimony. They're going to find cooperators inside Letitia James' office who are going to sit down and spill their guts related to what happened. Campaign emails to donors, private communications, possibly even Letitia James' own text messages to her staff. While they may not ultimately be able to get search warrants piercing a lot of this, they will have people who will cooperate and provide evidence. And evidence would include those communications that are going to look very problematic. She looks, based on these press conferences, like somebody who hates Donald Trump so much that she is sitting there texting her people all day long about how much she's going to go after him. There's going to be a treasure trove of information here. They'll demand records from James, looking for communications with outside political groups, possible contributions to get her elected, look for quid pro quo. You give me campaign money, I'll go after Donald Trump. And then there's going to be grand jury testimony. People will actually raise their right hand and say things about Letitia James that will be recorded in the grand jury. Now, that's going to be sealed. We won't hear about what happens in front of the grand jury, but certainly that testimony is going to implicate Letitia James. The DOJ will apply lots of pressure to cooperators. Forensic audits of her mortgage paperwork, every bank statement, tax return, and finding other false statements that were made are going to be very important here. When the FBI and forensics accountants team deal with this issue, they will look at these forms and they will map an entire financial picture of Letitia James and probably find a lot of other issues. If they see misrepresentation repeated across multiple loans, that's game over for the mistake defense that she and her attorney Abby Lowell seem to be discussing. One more point. Federal prosecutors love Rule 4B of the Federal Rules of Evidence. It allows them to introduce prior acts to show intent, knowledge, or absence of mistake. If they can show that she misrepresented properties more than once, they'll argue she knew exactly what she was doing. That can turn a strong case into an even stronger case. So let's put it together. Letitia James, mortgage fraud under 1014, 1344, 1343, potential 20-year sentences behind bars. Civil rights violations against Donald Trump, 241 and 242. Grand jury proceedings are already underway. Interestingly, these cases will likely be filed separate. She will have 2 grand juries, 2 court cases, 2 different potential punishments, 2 judges, and 2 opportunities to find a new home. in a jail cell. If indictments drop, the charges, they could stack up decades on her. And the irony is thick. The statute James once used to prosecute others will be used against her. Is it justice or revenge, as she's claiming? Jump down in the comments below and let me know what you think. I'm very interested. I'm certainly going to respond to a lot of them in the next video. But my opinion is that depends on whether the evidence shows criminal intent. Unlike Letitia James, I am interested in seeing how the evidence plays out. Now, we already know about these loan applications. We already know the public statements she's made about Trump. So I'm really interested to see what other evidence they uncover. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have some smoking guns. Either way, the investigation is real. The grand jury is real. The stakes couldn't be higher. I'm Ron Chapman, and this is Off the Air. Thanks for joining me. If you're not a subscriber, please click subscribe. And we certainly have some great offers for those who are reaching level 1 and level 2 subscription status. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.